Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the MJ Innocent podcast. My name is Moonwalker Tanya, and I'm your host. Okay, so I did receive some new MJ Funko Pops, but I will show this to you in a future video, because there is something else that I'm waiting to arrive. So in the meantime, it is roasting night. And in part 1, we will be roasting Jim Clemente. There is a lot to discuss, which is why it's going to be a 2-part, maybe even a 3-part if it gets to that point. So, let's do it.
So, let's move on to Michael Jackson. So obviously you have met Michael Jackson and you know a great deal about him. I understand that there's certain attorney-client privilege things that might be an issue, but he has definitely been he's probably one of the most famous people of all time. I mean, obviously he grew up in a time where the media was also growing and worldwide media grew, and he actually became...
Yeah, we are all too familiar with how the media was when Michael was alive, and even how the media is today when Michael isn't even here to defend himself. And for any younger viewers who are watching this, believe it or not, back in the 80s and 90s when Michael was extremely popular, even though he's still popular today, but even back then as the king of pop, we didn't even have social media back then. Like, social media really did not begin to come around until, like, I want to say, like, after the Invincible album, I believe. I wasn't on social media at the time, so I can't really be, like, 100% certain when social media started. I think MySpace was around first. I don't know. But, yeah. And the reason why I bring that up is because a lot of people are upset that people like Taylor Swift and other artists are either winning more awards than Michael's music is now, or they're on all these lists of, like, top favorite singers or whatever. But here's something that you have to remember. Like I just said, we didn't have social media when Michael was the king of pop. Like, extremely popular, like with Bad, Thriller, Dangerous, History, Invincible. You know, Michael did all of that on his own. You know? And so, the people who are famous today because of social media, I do not believe they would be at Michael's level back then when we didn't have social media, is basically what I'm trying to say. And... yeah, and Michael will always be popular. He doesn't always have to be number one because, I mean, even to us, you know, it's like a lot of his songs are number one to me, but he's not the only artist that I listen to, you know, and that's okay too, you know. But unfortunately, I think the media is getting worse, but what do you expect, you know? But at least we have social media to prove that they're nothing but BS. Oh, and those stupid tabloids.
Sort of the first star of the planet, right?
Well, let me be very candid with the viewers. You were an expert witness for the prosecution.
Oh, yeah, I was going to go into that. Yeah.
In his criminal case, you didn't testify, but you were on their witness list, and I was prepared to cross-examine you.
Well, you want to cross-examine me now?
I don't need to do that now. He was vindicated. He was...
And, I forgot to mention this before I started making this video. For those of you who do not know, Jim Clemente is a former FBI agent, but unfortunately, he is not as educated as he thought he was, like when it comes to the allegations against Michael, but you know, what do you expect? He's an MJ hater. And if I remember correctly, during the trial, I think he had cancer or something, and that's why he couldn't testify. And I'm just going to give a warning. I do not want to see any comments from people saying, like, I'm glad he had cancer so he couldn't testify. Stop it. I know a lot of you wouldn't do that, but I do know that there are, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, even back in 2020 when Martin Bashir had cancer, no, he didn't have cancer. He actually caught COVID. And there were some fans who wanted him to die from it. So that's why I'm saying that now. I don't want to see any of that stuff here. I'm not going to tolerate it. But yeah, and to be honest, Tom Mesereau, I wish you did cross-examine him in this interview, because I really think Jim Clemente needs a wake-up call.
Was found not guilty on every single felony count and every single misdemeanor count. 10 felonies, 4 lesser included misdemeanors. Very conservative jury in a very conservative community with a very high conviction rate.
True.
And they exonerated him just across the board. So I think that speaks volumes. I know you were going to testify as an education expert.
Yes,
you were not going to testify to the facts.
No, I was going to testify as an expert in the area
because he
of,
wouldn't survive.
Grooming and sex offender typologies and, compliant victimization. So it was what the purpose of my testimony would have been, not to bolster any witness or refute any witness, but to actually just educate the jury about particular aspects of child sexual victimization that may not be within.
To be honest, though, I do not believe Jim Clemente when he said that that he didn't want to persuade the jurors or anything that Michael was guilty. I do not believe that at all, especially since he was basically, he can try to say that he wasn't trying to do this with Tom Mesereau, but if you've seen this interview, it does seem to imply that, and it does seem very obvious that he believes Wade and James, which is unfortunate. And that's the part, and he's going to say something later in this interview that really contradicts his, as he claims it, as an expert when it comes to educating people when it comes to grooming. Because what people need to understand is there is a difference between grooming and being a good person. Now, if there was evidence against Michael that proved that he molested kids, then yes, if he did certain things for those particular alleged victims, then yes, that could be considered grooming. But, there are, well, it's not really as often anymore, unfortunately, but there are good people in this world who just want to do things for others just because they want to help them. And that's who Michael was. And it is unfortunate that it seems like, that that's what Jim is trying to point to as grooming. And I haven't done research on Jim yet, but he has mentioned that he is a survivor of sexual abuse, and to that, Jim, I am sorry. But after watching this interview, it does seem like you are being biased, which is actually very interesting because I've been in a lot of fights with a lot of MJ haters over the years, and they would always say, oh, you only believe Michael's innocent because you're an MJ fan. But then one time when I told MJ haters that I'm actually a survivor of sexual harassment and sexual assault from 2 different people in high school, they said, well, if you're a survivor, then you should automatically believe Wade and James. Okay, so we can't be biased as MJ fans, but I can be biased as a survivor? No, it doesn't work like that. And MJ haters have asked me many times, what would convince me that Michael is guilty? I have one word for you. Evidence. There has to be evidence. If you tell me something and there are inconsistencies that contradict it, and especially if you claim to be abused in either buildings or certain vacation spots that didn't even exist yet, and by that I mean Euro Disney. I'm not referring to the Grand Canyon. But, and by the way, Wade actually went on that trip, just in case you didn't know. But, yeah, it's, and especially if you go to a civil lawyer instead of the police, then no, I'm not going to take you seriously.
in the can of the average juror.
And I would have cross-examined you on how often experts like yourself have been wrong. And I would have cited the McMartin case, the Bakersfield case. I would have gone on and on.
Yeah, you would have talked about those cases
that you can't speculate.
That deal with 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. Actually, all the studies that talk about false allegations by children of child sex crimes, they're all very firmly in the area that they're typically during the course of a custody battle or children under 5 or under. And those are where the actual documented cases of...
Well, actually, Jim, if you studied the '05 case at all, which clearly you haven't, then you would actually know that Gavin Arvizo, who was, let's see, I think he was he 15 during the trial, I think? Somewhere around there. I think he was 13 the last time when he was at the ranch, if I remember correctly. But anyway, it is already documented that he and his family have lied constantly, not just on Michael, but also there was a newspaper writer, and there was also J.C. Penney's, and like I've said before, like, I'm personally not mad at Jordan or Gavin, because I can't relate to having horrible parents who forced you to lie on someone who was only trying to help you. I don't know what that's like. And I especially don't know what it's like to have a father like Evan Chandler. I cannot relate to that at all, and I'm actually thankful. And I do feel bad for kids who have terrible parents, but the problem is, I have seen many stories on the Steve Wilkos show where there were custody battles and kids were coached by one of the spouses to lie on the other spouse just so this particular spouse could get like custody, maybe even get the house, child support, alimony, and all this other crap. But the problem is there's a big difference between custody battles and child molestation. And most importantly, I've never heard of a custody battle where someone goes to a civil lawyer first instead of the police. And I've seen many episodes of the Steve Wilkos show, and I've never heard someone say, if you fail this lie detector test, I'm suing you for millions of dollars, or I'm suing you for billions of dollars. I've never seen a story like that. Sorry. And like I said before, that's why I don't believe in civil lawsuits when it comes to these kind of allegations unless there's a limit. Because people, you'll probably disagree with me on this, but I really don't care at this point. Like, I don't care if the person you are accusing is a celebrity or the average Joe. If you are pursuing a civil case, then how do you expect people to take you seriously? I mean, yeah, if your child needs therapy or something, then maybe a civil case of maybe, I don't know, $10,000, $20,000, maybe that would be a different story. I don't know, because so you could cover legal fees and maybe a year or two of therapy, but when you're trying to use a civil case to gain from it based on money, then no, it's not going to work that way. I'm not going to believe you.
False allegations have come in. Once children get past that age, they're socialized much more in school, and they're able to actually tell the difference between fantasy and reality.
But you know as well as I do, from practical experience, a 13-year-old will lie much more than a 5-year-old.
Well, it depends on the situation.
In fact, 11, 12, 13, they can lie repeatedly.
They can, but very rarely do they lie about being sexually victimized by a man. A male victim who is victimized by a man.
Okay, so why does it matter that it's a man? Like, and when Jim said, well, it depends. Jim, come on. I'm pretty sure Jim would pretty much believe anyone who ever came forward. And and here's the thing about that. When it comes to the Me Too movement, if it's giving real victims a voice, then I'm all for it. But unfortunately, not every person who comes forward has the best intentions. You know. But, I mean, Jim, seriously, are you going to really tell me that you haven't met a single teenager who's ever told a bunch of lies? Because I went to school with plenty of them. Trust me. So that's probably the dumbest thing I ever heard. But, I mean, even adults lie all the time. So how are teenagers, like, the exception? But back to this whole thing about accusing a male, like, I think it's weird how it's like if you accuse a man of molestation, people should automatically believe it. But if a woman is being accused of molesting a young boy, then people don't look at it the same way, you know? And even I have issues with that. You know, if you are a child molester, it does not matter if you are a man or a woman. I'm just saying.
Is much less likely to say that in public or any other circumstance. You know, you've seen the John Jay study in the Catholic Church cases. I mean, the average time it took that adults to come forward was 20 years, and 25% of them didn't come forward till 30 years later. It's a very, very difficult thing. I mean, I myself, and I've been very open about this, I was victimized as a kid, and I was planning on never telling anybody, but when my brother approached me 10 years later and said we should do something about that camp director, that's when I found out that there were other victims. I said, oh, well, I need to do something about it because I was...
Okay, so I really hate it when people compare the allegations against Michael to other celebrities or other organizations. You know, every case is different. And especially the Catholic Church thing. Oh. And I think there were even commercials against the Boy Scouts or something. Like, but here's the issue that I had with even those commercials. They only talked about civil lawsuits. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, wouldn't you want real justice for your child? And I've heard from many MJ haters and even Dan Reed himself when he tried to say that money is justice. No, it's not. And if you think money is justice for one of the most horrific things that your child could ever go through, then I really pray to God that you don't have kids, because you would clearly do not give a damn about the situation if it was your child. Either that or you just don't care at all because you're too full of yourself. It's either one or the other. And I just have to say, stop with the civil suits. Only pursue the criminal case. Go to the police. Cooperate with the authorities. Cooperate with the court system. Otherwise, you don't have my support. And I feel bad for the people who actually do take the allegations against Michael seriously, even though I cannot say that every MJ hater actually believes the allegations. I do believe that there are MJ haters who would literally believe anything. Like I've said before, Wade and James could even claim that they were abused on Titanic when Titanic sank in 1912, but MJ haters would still believe it. And I know what you're thinking. Well, Tanya, that's crazy. Exactly. And like I said earlier, Jim, like, I am sorry about what happened to you. I might look into it myself. But, you know, and I understand that there are victims who don't come forward right away. And some of them are even still afraid to come forward even to this day. But one thing you have to understand is if you're dealing with a child molester, you're not going to be their only victim, unfortunately. And it is important to come forward. I know it's scary. I know it can be intense because maybe you have a habit of lying to people and maybe you're afraid this time they're not going to take you seriously. I mean, it happens. You know, that's why I even tried to bring that up when I've even talked to people about the '05 case, you know. Gavin and his family lied so much that when you come forward with something as serious as these allegations, you really can't be surprised if people don't believe you because of your past. So, yeah. I would just say that if you don't have supportive parents that you can open up to, maybe you have to talk to a teacher or a close friend or another relative or a coworker, your boss, or, anyone. Anyone who you can open up to and tell them. But here's the thing, though. Don't make false allegations like Wade and James. It's not worth it.
Prepared to just keep my silence forever. I was embarrassed. I felt shameful. I felt like it was my fault or something was wrong with me. And these are the common things that victims experience. And I'm not saying, I know, and I would never even want to try to get you to say that Michael Jackson is guilty or a bad person.
I would never say.
I know you. I never thought you would.
He was a wonderful person, and he was completely innocent of these horrible allegations.
And they are horrible allegations, but what I'm talking about now is not that he wasn't a wonderful person, because there are definitely people who are wonderful people who also are sexually attracted to children. And if Michael was a pedophile, he was a loving pedophile, and that's a category of offenders who literally love children. They also fall in love with children, and that's where they cross the line. And again, I think Jerry Sandusky is a pet. He did not.
Okay, so this will be my final part for part 1 of roasting Jim Clemente. I think he contradicted himself from what he said earlier when he said that he was an expert on educating people on grooming and stuff. Jim, there is no such thing as a child molester who was a wonderful person, because wouldn't that be considered grooming? All the, quote, wonderful things they were doing for people? Wouldn't that be grooming if they were child molesters? And when he also said, if Michael Jackson was a pedophile, then he was a loving pedophile. There is no such thing. Even MJ haters tried to say, well, Michael was a sensitive pedophile. There's no such thing. Pedophiles do not give a damn. If they abuse children, they only care about what they want. They don't care who they hurt in the process. And they are not sensitive to what their victims want them to not do. Okay, so part 2 will come soon. I hope you enjoyed this video. Jim Clemente, learn to educate yourself. All right, I'll see you in the comments. Love ya.